Welcome back to DAC Fest. And I'm finally gonna do part 2. First, let me finish this cigar real quick, and then I'll get the video started. So sit tight for about an hour. Damn. It's not just about Cuban cigars anymore, guys. Well, it hasn't been for a long time, but other places have the recipe now, and they're freaking amazing. So, DAC Fest. So the first DAC Fest, so I don't know if you can hear my dog growling. She doesn't want me to do the video. She doesn't want me to do the video. So in the first part, we looked at the DACs under $1,000, so the appetizer DACs. We went through a bunch of those, and yeah, and I think my come here. Back to the DACs. So the $1,000 DACs that I looked at in the first video. In the end, to summarize it all up, most of the DACs in that category are, they're just that. They're appetizers. And as far as the source is concerned, when it comes to the DAC, over time, I realized something about myself, that I don't just want small bites. I want big bites. I want to be able to feel the voices. I want to feel the strings. I want that right balance of decay and speed. Mind you, the amplifier probably has a lot to do with that too. Like, I want to feel that balance in the same way that I'll feel a balance when I listen to a live instrument. And let's face it, like, I don't know if any of you are familiar with like Jay's Audio Lab that started a few years ago. But Jay said something at one point when OCD Mikey went to visit him. He said that when you're listening to a trumpet, if you had a trumpet in the room, the trumpet will at some point start to feel aggressive to your ears. It's just a natural characteristic of the instrument. So I want it to sound real. I do want to get occasionally that sense of like a feeling of overwhelming attack on my eardrums, not to the point that it hurts and that it's unlistenable. Meaning, I can sit there and listen to someone playing the trumpet live. Yes, it can be overwhelming at times, but it doesn't hurt my ears. It's not painful. It's natural. I mean, it would hurt your ears if you're right up to it. But yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm saying. Remember, the more resolving and transparent things get, the more revealing of flaws starts to happen. So, like, great recordings will sound amazing, but bad recordings become borderline unlistenable, like if you become too transparent and resolving. Kind of like when, I don't know if some of you remember, well, some of you, probably a lot of you remember, based on the analytics of my videos, none of you are young toddlers. When high definition TVs came out, and I think it was even worse when high definition flat screens came out. So when you took one of those high definition flat screens and you looked at a high definition signal on it, it looked great. Play a DVD on it, or worse, a VHS tape, holy crap, it looked worse than it ever looked before. Similar with hi-fi. For instance, even with vinyl, when I had a moving coil cartridge and I had a decent turntable and got decent phono stages, the high-end recordings and good pressings that were well mastered sounded incredible. It sounded just glorious. But then when I pick up some old rock albums from a yard sale out of a bargain bin, and weren't too sure about the pressings, it didn't sound too good with the moving coil cartridge. But then when I used it with a cheaper moving magnet cartridge, so yeah. So out of the main course DACs, let's look at the main course DACs now. I've been yakking around for a little too much. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna go in the cave for this part. All right, so in the main course DACs, I'm going to jump right to my conclusion with the lists of DACs that I used. My three favorite ones was the Venus 2, the Prima Luna Evo 100, and the Sonnet Morpheus. Those are my three favorites. Why? Because they did most of what it is I look for. So I mentioned it a lot of times. I want to feel the strings. I want to feel the vocals. I want the spatial cues of the room. I want to feel the scale and size of the auditorium, the studio, whatever. I want to feel like I'm there, whether I'm sitting in on a studio recording, or I'm sitting in a small acoustic show, or I'm at a symphonic orchestra performance. I want to feel like I'm there. So, like the Venus 2, I think edged out most of the DACs that I tried in this category. I mean, it had such a musicality while still bringing you in. I mean, it was everyone, all the feedback you read online, I agree with. So I don't think I necessarily need to add too much to that. Gorgeous tone of instrument. All the timbres seem to be right. You had detail, no fatigue whatsoever. It was fluid. It was silky smooth. The soundstage was super wide, nice and deep. Can't ask for better, really. However, it needed a few hours of warm-up time. So the Venus, if you're someone who doesn't leave their equipment on, if you sit down for just 1 hour to listen and the Venus wasn't already on, you're not getting the best of it. And at first I thought that was BS. Man, I tried it like a dozen times. Sat down, cold Venus, turn it on, sit down, listen. Nope, didn't have the magic. Come back 3 hours later, wow. Everything was a lot smoother, nothing stayed. There was no blurriness between the instruments like there is a little bit when it's cold. Blurriness, it's relative, come on. It's not blurry, but compared to what it's like when it's warmed up, everything's just happy, everything's just comfortable. All the positioning of instruments, whether it's you have a guitar back here, drums on the side over here, and you have the singer center stage, you feel the space between all these items, which is great, right? Because in my room, my soundstage, there's cues that come behind you occasionally, depending on someone really wants to talk to me. It's Thomas. So you have things in the back and everything, but for me, most of the soundstage starts right where the speakers are and then pushes out that way. So you rarely feel that things are beyond the wall here and there, but you feel things that are beyond the wall down there, down there, down there, down there. And I actually, with the main appetizer DACs, you get a good differentiation between the audience, which depending on the type of recording and where the microphone is positioned, the audience actually feels where you are or behind you. But sometimes the audience feels behind the instruments, almost like you're sitting backstage behind the band or the orchestra. It's really interesting. I don't know how I can see. Maybe it's just me. My brain doesn't work really well. Anybody else ever experienced that from one recording to another? Curious. Now the Sonnet Morpheus did a lot of similarities to the Venus. Very similar sound characteristics. I mean, they're both R2R DACs. The one thing though I have to say, the Sonnet Morpheus did not quite do the depth and layering that the Venus did, but splitting hairs here, it was still pretty damn good. Whereas the Prima Luna Evo 100, that one was like super laid back as far as the DAC is concerned. So it was like everything was where it should be. Nothing drew attention to itself. Everything was on an even keel everywhere. And that's a DAC. You sit there and listen for hours with this DAC, no problem. And it had a really good bass response. It really did. In my room, I really loved the bass energy that it gave out. I'd say it might have been a hint of exaggeration, but we were kidding. Exaggeration in bass is fun. I think everybody likes that, as long as it's not overdone. Bang for the buck. Bang for the buck in the ones I've tried. I think that one for me, if budget was a concern, Pontus 2 and Dorsch 7. Yeah, both of those were a lot of fun. The Dorsch 7, there's a caveat to the Dorsch 7 though. The stock tubes, didn't do it for me. But after a little bit of tube rolling, because I find the Dorsch 7 has very much of a neutral sounding characteristic. So it's not warm, it's not cool or too analytical, but I like it. I like it with a flare of warmth, or I'll take warm over cold. So I had to put some warm sounding tubes in there to make it to my liking, but it was really good. Very, very good DAC. Just like the Pontus 2. Pontus 2 is largely, you get largely what the Venus 2 does. What you don't get with Pontus 2 that Venus does well is the detail in the bass and the refinement in the bass. But otherwise, and if you're not an obsessive analytical listener, doesn't matter, man. I think for the price, Pontus 2, holy crap, what a great DAC. Dorsch 7 as well. So now, with what I found, what I was the most excited about was trying the tube buffer and trying the digital reclocker with all of these DACs as well. Now, did it have the same impact as with the appetizer DACs? With some of them a little, some of them no, some of them made it worse. So again, to remind you guys the configuration, so the digital reclocker obviously comes between the streamer and the DAC, and the tube buffer was between the DAC and my preamp. Examples of where the digital clocker made it better. The digital clocker made it better a little bit, I'd say, for all of the DACs. Where it didn't do so much, I think, was with two of them, was with the Venus 2 and with the Prima Luna. With both of those, honestly, I'm not sure I could tell the difference. But it wasn't worse, and there was occasionally I wanted to believe that it sounded better, like it had a darker background at times, but snake oil. So no, I'm not sure. But now when you talk about the tube buffer, so the tube buffer, if you remember my take on the tube buffer is, if a DAC has a poor analog output stage, or its analog output stage is less in terms of quality and design than the tube buffer you're using, the tube buffer will enhance the performance of your DAC, so that when that sound wave gets to your preamp, it'll be better thanks to that tube buffer. But again, it's all relative. Here, when I use the tube buffer with the Venus 2, which it looks like it has a very decent analog output stage, it made it a lot better to my ears. Man, everything became even more three-dimensional, a lot more air, a lot more grip in the mid-range, same bass, the bass was still there, the detail was still there, but you had that textured nuances, and it's like the contrast was just right. It made you realize that maybe it was the contrast was a little bit low before I put the tube buffer in. So that's with the Venus 2. With the Prima Luna, no, made it worse. Because I think the Prima Luna has one heck of an analog output stage. It's got beefy transformers in there. That's my guess. I'm not an engineer. I can't tell you for sure. But that's why I would think that the analog output stage made it worse. With the Sonnet Morpheus, it didn't make it worse, but it added a little bit of, it felt like I was hearing tube noise when I used the Sonnet Morpheus. Maybe because without the Sonnet Morpheus on its own, maybe it had such a dark background and such a low noise floor that when I put the tube buffer in there, now I was hearing something that wasn't quite right. Yeah, with the Pontus 2, tube buffer was amazing. With the Dorsch 7, tube buffer was amazing. Cranked everything up. And the digital reclocker with the Dorsch, the Dorsch 7 and the Pontus 2, also helped. It darkened the background even more, separated the instruments even more. Everything was super well defined. So yeah, what do you know? Who would have thought adding $2,000 of accessories to a DAC it would make it better? Yeah, it does. All right, so which one did I pick in the end? Picked the Venus 2, right? That's the one I bought? No, I didn't. The reason why I didn't buy the Venus 2 is because I got to hear higher tier DACs. Just a couple, not many. Talk about that in another one. But I couldn't afford those. I just can't. I can't justify it. Everything's relative to your income. But as you can tell, I ain't rich. Oh, this is built by me, by my mans, my little man hands. They're called mans. So which one did I buy in the end? I bought the Musical Paradise. Cool. This one? No, not this one. Well, I did buy this one, but that's not the one I picked because it's an appetizer DAC. You mean the other one? Oh, you mean this one? No, not this one. This belongs to a friend of mine. I just borrowed it just to see if I liked it. So which one did I get? I got this one. This big thing that weighs, I don't know, feels like it weighs 30 pounds right now. Yeah. Why did I buy this one? Because when I tried the expensive DACs, and of course I love them, even more than the little ones, my arm is shaking. That's how heavy it is. Because you know me. And how I love those high expensive DACs, I looked inside them. Most of them were tube rectified. So when it's tube rectified, you get the roll tubes, and they had good rectifiers in there. They had serious capacitors, and oh wait, if we're talking about capacitors, they had serious power supplies in there. They were heavy. Why? Because transformers are heavy. I don't like this guy. Most of them had tubes in their output stage. Tubes. And the capacitors they were using were some like these. So when I saw how customizable this guy is, without too much soldering, if any soldering, if you don't want to solder, I said, hey, I'm going to try it. Because one, it's not expensive. And two, by the time I'm done with these upgrades, do parts matter? Do parts matter? They do. So, yeah. Next video, all about this guy. Okay, I gotta put it down. Oh. Stay tuned. Next up, we talk about that one. The Musical Paradise MPD2 MK3 Deluxe.